So I'm here a year early. I just realized, so I'm actually going to leave now. I'm here for a variety of reasons. I'm here because of the great respect I hold for both of your ministers. I have long watched you because I saw that you were growing and that you were responding to the shared ministry that was being created here. And I'm here because I have Iowa roots. My parents met at Iowa State. And those of you of a certain age, if you were attending Iowa State and you ever went into campus drugs, my grandfather was co-owner and pharmacist of campus drugs. And I used to come to Des Moines every summer as a small child when we lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I'm here a year early because you have a very fox-like, clever minister who wanted me to see not the Des Moines of my childhood, but the Des Moines of today. And he took me to Luca's for dinner last night. And I'm here because I'm not sure Mark and Aaron know the story of Spirit of Life. Carolyn McDade had just been at those meetings that those of us who are activists know well. Everyone thought they had common goals, but they couldn't get beyond their petty interests, and there was a lot of disagreement in the meeting that she attended, and she was really upset. And the arguing went late into the night, and she was full of despair. And so she came home that night, and her husband and her children were fast asleep. And she sat down full of despair, not sure she could go on with her activism, not with life, but with her activism. And she sat down at the piano, and her hands touched the keys, and Spirit of Life is what came to her. And it saved her life. So it is not surprising that Unity Church sang Spirit of Life this Sunday after this most recent election, because so many of us are full of despair. But I'm here with you today, really, as the Ministerial Settlement Rep, one of them of the Mid-America region. And I'm here because you, the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines, have a deep desire to continue to be a vital and strong congregation. You want to continue to be a voice for liberal religious values in your community, and you want to continue to do this in partnership with a called and settled minister. As our colleague Ray Drennan, long retired, reminds us, the term settled minister is really a misnomer. If I learned anything over my 30 years of being an ordained minister, I've learned that all ministries are actually interim, some lasting 2 years and some lasting 25. The only permanent ministry is yours, the ministry of the congregation, which of course is in itself in constant evolution. I always loved the story of another colleague, long gone, but served with extinction. That too, it turns out, who served with distinction at our church in Vancouver, British Columbia. When Philip Hewitt arrived on his first Sunday, he came into the chancel with his walking stick and a backpack. Now, Philip and his wife were avid hikers, but he wanted to make a point, and he set the walking stick and the backpack next to the pulpit, and he said, when I pick these things up again, because on his very first Sunday, he wanted to communicate to the congregation that he would someday be leaving them. So all ministers are temporarily on the scene. And the bottom line reality, of course, is that if we dare to stop to think about it, we actually all are carrying temporary passes in this journey we call life. We all move on. We're always moving through and moving on, and there's no such thing as permanence except for change itself, our Buddhist colleagues remind us. For ministers and for congregations, our desire to have things stay the same, to keep things settled, is often actually our very undoing. It was Ralph Waldo Emerson who once said, "People wish to be settled, but only as far as they are unsettled is there any hope for them." So it is with us all. Only when we are enough unsettled is there hope for us, and we ourselves can be prophets of imagination. So the shared ministry between members and clergy must never seek too much settlement. And if we wish to be religious communities that matter in our world, then we need to find the courage to adapt and grow and change and imagine. Without such dynamic movement, there is no life or hope for us. Without openness to change, we are of little use to our troubled world. So as I write these words, or as I wrote them last week, I can only imagine that some of you are saying, "Oh, sure, right." Because sometimes we all know that change is challenging. And I don't know about you, but I hate surprises. If you doubt that, ask any member of my family about how their attempts to surprise me have gone. They didn't know some of the swear words I was capable of saying. So what's true is that we're only human, and humans generally resist change. And at the same time, we court it and we welcome it. So we dance in this paradox. We hold this ambiguity of moving toward change and moving away from change. And to make matters worse, some of us are feeling particularly vulnerable and at sea, given the results of the recent election. There is so much change happening around us all the time. And in these trying times, the pace of change threatens to engulf and overwhelm us. We have an almost desperate need to find places of comfort and strength. So the importance of our liberal faith communities comes into sharp relief, how important they are in these challenging times. Thomas Friedman, in his marvelous new book, Thanks for Being Late, An Optimist's Guide to Surviving in the Age of Acceleration, describes how exponentially accelerations are occurring in the nature of the market, in our changing climate, and in burgeoning technology, which present an existential threat to human beings for whom change is hard enough. And when it sneaks up on us, let alone when it comes on like an unexpected storm. So having offered extensive evidence for the accelerating pace of change and the challenge that change presents, Friedman found himself wondering what best equips us to cope with change. And his exploration of this question led him back home to the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Friedman writes, "One afternoon I was driving in my car in the Twin Cities, listening to music, when a song came on the radio that spoke to me so much that I pulled off the road as soon as I could, and I wrote down the lyrics. The main refrain is, I wrapped your love around me like a chain, but I never was afraid that it would die. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. For those of you who listen to some country and Western music, it's in that genre. And it's a wonderful song, and I commend it to you. So I hope it is clear by now that every day going forward, we're being asked to dance in the eye of the hurricane, set off by changes going on in our world. There is only one way to thrive now, and it's by finding and creating your own eye, in your own spiritual lives, and in the life of the communities which sustain and nourish us. The eye of the hurricane moves along with the storm, and it draws its energy from it, while creating a sanctuary of stability inside it. So it's dynamic and stable at the same time. And so must we be. We can't escape the accelerating change around us. We can't change the fact that your beloved senior minister is leaving at the end of this church year. So we have to dive into the wind of change and take advantage of the energy and flow, and when possible, move with it and use those forces to learn faster and faster, design smarter, collaborate more deeply, so that we can build our own eye to anchor and propel our families and communities confidently forward. The closest analogy for the eye of the hurricane, Friedman writes, is a healthy community. And in this book, Friedman offers an exquisite affirmation for the purpose of religious community. We are, after all, a village in the city, a healthy community that at its best helps anchor and propel us confidently forward. And I want you to know, and I said this to the board of trustee members who joined with me yesterday with Aaron, that you have a reputation of being a healthy congregation. And that is really important for your future. Some years ago, I got to fulfill a bucket list dream. I enrolled in a week-long course for paragliding. And my husband, who loves me dearly, begrudgingly signed up too. And I was so thrilled, and we got up into the mountains and to prepare for, and acclimate to the altitude. We went a few days early, and 2 days before the class was to begin, we were hiking, and I stumbled and had a really bad fall and sprained my ankle, the worst sprain I've ever had, where it swells 2 or 3 times size, and it's red and purple, and we went to the store, and I got an ace bandage, and I wrapped myself up, and I was determined I was going to go paragliding. But to paraglide, you have to run and catapult yourself off a mountain. Sounds great, doesn't it? And I could barely walk. And so after a few days of trying, the instructor met with my husband and me and kicked us out of the class. He said, "You can't, and you don't really want to, do you?" And my husband said, "You're right, I'm doing it for her." And he said, "You can't do this. This is dangerous." And so we left. But he said, "But come back, and you can get a ride after everyone, you can watch your fellow students take their finals, and then I'll take you out for a tandem ride. So we did, and we watched the star, this is in my script, but we watched the star student fail. And we watched the other students do just fine. And so when it was all over, my husband did his ride, and his was so quick, but that was fine, that's what he wanted. And so the tandem is where you literally run off a mountain with another person at your back, and then you fly off, and he was in control. And as we were, and we started soaring over the countryside, and I was in heaven. And he said, "Do you want to take over the controls?" And I said, "Sure." And I grabbed the controls, and I think he knew exactly what he was doing, because as soon as I took the controls, the turbulence hit. And I was like, oh. And every time the turbulence, the wind hit us, I tried to control our apparatus. And he said, "You can't control the turbulence. The turbulence indicates that there are wind currents which we can catch and will carry us up. So without the wind, we can't go any higher." So the turbulence actually was an invitation, which I didn't know to read. So I stopped fighting the turbulence and found the wind currents with his instruction and his guidance. And we went higher and higher. And it was so wonderful. And I learned, even though I didn't get to complete the class and I've never paraglided by myself, I learned an important life lesson that day about not worrying so much about those little bouts of wind, but learning to ride and read the currents of change. Now, I suspect that some of you are excited about the possibilities that you all face now as a congregation, while others of you are more dubious in apprehension about the future you're living into. Anticipated change is coming. There is no denying this reality. And I'm here, and I'll be back in a year, to encourage you to take advantage of this in-between time that you're headed towards. This time can be extremely productive, creative, and transformative. So live into it with a willingness to let the dynamic winds of change lead you into that sanctuary of the I. So this time can be productive if you take the time to explore who you are, who you aren't, and who you want to become. You are a vital congregation in this community, and in this state, and in this region. And now more than ever, your leadership and your religious voice are critically important in the religious landscape in this area. Your congregation has both strengths and weaknesses, places where it excels, places where it's stuck. And this in-between time is a perfect time to take the time to look deeply into the mirror and have the courage to name what you see and what you don't see, and to change what is not working, to improve what's not working, and what's not helping you grow into all that you can and want to be, that religious presence that is so needed in today's world. And this time is a perfect time to have amicable collisions, which is a phrase that comes from the 18th century, and it comes from political discourse, and it was embraced as a concept which encouraged respectful exploration, debate, and evaluation. So engage with one another. Don't be afraid to run into each other. And don't be threatened by differing viewpoints and different visions that people have. All of you have a part to play in this dance of faith in which we are involved. Each of you is going to be a partner in this dance. And the dance of shared ministry means that each and every one of you is responsible, along with your professional leadership, for keeping your congregational life inclusive and vital and real. Now, it used to be that congregations had distinct personalities. But now, what we find in our congregations is that we actually contain the full theological spectrum, and that whole diversity can be found in pretty much every single one of our congregations. Now, I'm going to ask you to participate in my sermon. When I say a theological label that best categorizes what you think you are or what you believe, I want you to stand and remain standing. Okay? And if you can't rise in body, please raise your hand. Okay? So those of you who identify as an atheist, as your primary religious identity, will you please stand? Okay. Those of you who identify as humanist, please stand. Those of you who identify as theists, please stand and remain standing. Those of you who identify as uncertain and still exploring and refuse to be pinned down to labels, please stand. Oh, you're that kind of congregation. And those of you who are not yet standing, can I ask you to tell us what you identify? Buddhist. Christian. Mystic. Thank you. That was on my list and I hadn't yet said it. Mystic. Spiritualist. So in this room, you have Gina, I didn't see you stand.
Presbyterian Universalist.
So in this room is something so phenomenal. This full religious spectrum does not happen very many places. This is precious. Thank you. You can all sit down. Thank you so much for participating with me. I'll tell you, I'm a panentheist, and you can talk to me at coffee hour what that means. And what's also true, is that most Unitarian Universalists are atheists to the God you're an atheist to as well. But this theological spectrum is something so rare and precious, and it's something that all of you are the guardians of. All of you have a part to play in this dance of faith. And our liberal and inclusive embrace is too important and precious not to be available to everyone looking for a religious home like this one. So all of you are charged to create a safe place for respectful engagement, for becoming the prophetic theologians that Walter Brueggemann is talking about, to move toward the winds of change, creativity, and possibility. Look around this room. Look around this room. These are the ministers. You're looking at the ministers of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Each of you shares in this ministry, whether in a formal or informal way. Each of you needs to find the spiritual sources of refreshing spirit. Each of you needs to find a daily clearing or a way to create a sanctuary of stability at the center of the storm, a still point from which we can move through the world, not only with righteous indignation, but also with joy and expectation, giving thanks as we find the words to talk about what really matters and what can save us all. May it be so, and amen. And before we sing our closing song, our closing hymn for All That Is Our Life, I want to close with this poem, How to Build a Swing. You carry all the ingredients to turn your life into a nightmare. Don't mix them. You have all the genius to build a swing in your backyard for God. That sounds a hell of a lot more fun. Let's start laughing, drawing blueprints, gathering our talented friends. You carry all the ingredients to turn your existence into joy. Mix them, mix them, mix them.